Good afternoon. My name is Marques Jackson. I'm with MDJ Consulting Group. A little bit about me, former sports entertainment executive, previously worked at Hard Rock Stadium in corporate partnerships with the Miami Dolphins, Formula One, and Miami Open. And I have the esteemed pleasure to have a great panel discussion today on beyond innovation and really talking about the future of tomorrow cities. And I have some great subject matter experts that I would like to bring to the stage. The first one is Pascale Sablan. And a little bit about Pascale, I'm going to share some background with you. She is the CEO of the Third Office and founder and executive director of Beyond the Built Environment, which is a globally recognized architect and strategist. She's previously served as CEO of the New York studio at Adige Associates, best known for delivering the Smithsonian National Museum of African American History and Culture, overseeing projects across the Americas. With over 18 years of experience, her work operates at the intersection of urban development, economic growth, and social impact, shaping cities through cultural infrastructure, civic investment, and community-centered design, while elevating the work and identity of women and people of color. Wow, that is quite the mouthful. Quite the amazing, amazing. And then our next esteemed guest is Kirk-Anthony Hamilton. Please give a round of applause for Kirk-Anthony Hamilton. Kirk is an entrepreneur, investor, ecosystem builder, focused on driving innovation, economic growth across the Caribbean. He's the founder of Infinity Partnership. He's co-founder of Tech Beach Retreat and founding managing partner of NovaMed Health. Through his work, he has created globally recognized platforms that connect capital, influence, and talent, catalyzing new enterprise formation and sustainable wealth creation across the region. So give a round of applause for these two esteemed guests. So guys, as we think about innovation in tomorrow's cities, as we often talk about innovation in terms of technology, but in regions like the Caribbean, innovation is also about governance, access, and economic structure. How should we be redefining innovation when we talk about building cities of tomorrow? Do you want to start with you, Sablan? Pascale?
Sure. For me, as an architect, it's really about the delivery of the projects. And when we think about the Caribbean, it's important that we don't superimpose what has been designed in Western communities and spaces, but really think about the culture, the identity, the expertise, the techniques, the materials, and how we can be the most sustainable. Because as you know, the Caribbean nations together are impacted significantly by weather and how it's practicing those spaces, water, wind, earthquakes. There's so many elements that we really do need to design for, and it needs to be designed for specifically, intentionally, and specifically in that way. But it's also not just about the end product, about the end results, the design of the products that we create, but it's the way that we engage the community in which that's working on the projects, from the communities that we're designing for, but also the people who are building the projects as well. So with projects that I've done in Barbados, for example, where there was a mandate that 75% of the work construction group had to be those who were from the local community, which meant we were training, we were showing them how we were getting these building techniques done, and we were creating a whole new model of financial justice for the local talents of that community, and step away from flying in talents to come in and build that we have a talent in that space. So I say it's important that we are not only designing specifically and very bespoke for the Caribbean nation that we're working with and in that community, but also in a way that we're elevating the talent, the knowledge pool that is there, and creating a whole new industry for the countries.
Love that. I'm actually an architect by training myself, turned entrepreneur and investor. For me, totally in agreement, coming from an island that experienced probably the worst hurricane that we've seen hit landfall in history, being Hurricane Melissa hitting Jamaica last year. Islands are now having to rethink how we go about development, how we consider this thing of the impact of climate, and all of those dynamics come into play. I think, at the end of the day, innovation is about being different, and then you add the layer of purposeful, etc. In the region, it is to some extent easier for something to be considered innovative, while at the same time, what ends up happening is when you try to be different, that presents certain bottlenecks, etc. So we, for example, own a 155-room hotel property in Kingston, Jamaica, that we're in the process of converting into a business and lifestyle center, effectively. In North America, that's a very normal thing. Everybody repurposes buildings all the time. It's not a hard conversation to have. You have historic transformations that end up happening. In the Caribbean context, we are very, very unique. We are a first in the region when it comes to a project like this. And so it ends up coming with all the pillars that you mentioned in terms of having to add these layers of governance, etc., which apply, but in the way that we need it just has not been seen before. So to Pascale's point, you end up with this process where you end up having to lead in ways that maybe you were not considering in the beginning, but to the maximum benefit of the region at the end of the day.
Love it. Staying on ecosystems and thinking about ecosystems versus execution, Kirk, just staying with your work, I know it's more about building ecosystems and mobilizing capital and networks and opportunity. Pascale, your work focuses on execution. How do those visions actually get delivered? Where do you see the biggest disconnect between vision and implementation today, and what does it take to close that gap?
Interesting.
Tough.
So when I look at our work, what we have had to do is seek out opportunity in what would seem like far-fetched places beyond the scope of the region with an aim of bringing value into the region. So I always share with people, capital alone does not solve problems for the Caribbean. A lot of people come into the Caribbean region with a mindset that says it's small, it's going to be easy to navigate, and all I'm going to do is, bring this westernized way of doing things and plow through a culture that then they face these certain levels of resistance. I'll give a simple example. In the work that we do, again, we have had a lot of historic firsts that may seem like nothing in a context like this, in a North American context, but in the Caribbean, it's a big deal. A company like Google has zero presence in the region. When we then bring them to the table and have them start to interact in the ecosystem in a meaningful way, deploying capital, partnering with organizations, etc. They still don't have an office yet, and this is my play to encourage seeing that happen one day. But when you have that presence achieved, from a Caribbean context, this is a game changer. Again, in a North American context, this is the norm. You kind of expect them to be there. You're able to walk into their offices, do a tour, etc. But if you're able to bring these kind of known values into the market, that is the execution that I think has driven our success. And it's the kind of value that the region thirsts for and needs. And again, to Pascale's earlier point, I just encourage that anybody looking to do business with us always thinks of, beyond capital, what value am I bringing into this market that ultimately then benefits the people?
So I'm going to take the question in a different direction, and I'm going to bring my background as a proud Haitian American, Pascale, the most Haitianist name you'll ever hear in your life. But for 2010, when we had the earthquake, the tremblement, we lost so many people. And so the level of devastation was significant. And I lost actually all of my family in that one moment. And so a lot of the early parts of my career was coming back to Haiti to participate as an architect to help evaluate some of the structures that had maintained and also understand how architecture had harmed in that way. And so what I wanted to speak to is the idea of sometimes when we're dealing with the Caribbean, we're also coming at a time that there's significant loss, whether it be the storm that we're talking about, whether it be the earthquake in Puerto Rico. Like there's all these islands are impacted at such a scale that it requires innovation, but it also requires mobilization pretty quickly to ensure that those who are without housing, without food, without fresh water are having access to that in a way that's thoughtful enough that 10, 15 years from now, that's not something that needs to be redone and chucked up and thrown out, but actually being part of a line to the pillar pillars of what the leadership is advocating for. So I'm going to sound like a broken record when I talk about sustainability, but it cannot be underemphasized as it relates to the Caribbean nations in that way. And also understanding the connection between a vision to execution. Also, that schedule can be very condensed, and the stakes that is at risk is not just economic prosperity, but actually like survival of those who are there. And how do we do it in a way that gives people dignity? There's ways that we try to mobilize things as quickly as possible, but does the techniques and the materials that we're using need to be low material quality, that we're seeing it as a temporary thing? I love tents, but for that to be your forever home after you've lost a home that you've taken generations to build is a very important struggle that people have to consider. And us as designers and those who are implementing architecture need to understand how our identities, how our livelihoods, how our memories, our histories, all rooted into the built environment, into the soil. And so how do we represent that in a way that really elevates and heals those who have been harmed by the natural disasters that have been hit? So I think it's really important that when we think about implementation and vision, it's really about the speed in which we need to do that, and how do we do that where we're still doing that in an intentional way, in a way that brings high quality.
Well said. Staying in the same vein and theme of the Caribbean, as we think about the Caribbean being somewhat often overlooked, particularly as in global urban conversations, yet it's still becoming a hub for innovation, investment, and new development models. What is the region getting right? As you think about other parts of the world should be paying closer attention to, what are they doing right that other parts of the world should be thinking about?
So again, I'm going to geek out about Prime Minister Mia Mottley of Barbados, who got on, I see a hand up, we with it. But she's incredible because she went on the UN stage and really challenged all of the nations to really consider sustainability as their approach. And we were really happy to deliver a mass timber structure for Carrie Festa last August on the island. That was a convening of Caribbean nations that happened every 3 years. And using mass timber was an architectural implementation of the principles that she had been fighting for. But in her speeches and in those conversations was about how the water wasn't dividing, but actually connecting them, and how they had to move as a unit and think about how we can share our resources, our techniques, and really build each other up, rather than always looking to far over nations that maybe not think as the Caribbean as the same level or caliber and bring that down. So I say all that to say what I think they're doing right is that they're mobilizing together, that they're not seeing themselves as individual islands, but really finding ways where they can work together and move as a unit, because collectively they're challenged with some of the similar things. And as the immediate past presidents of NOMA, the National Organization of Minority Architects, one of the things that I did during my presidency was make our organization international and actually speak to and bring in Caribbean chapters, because although those spaces and countries might be diverse in population, they are not in control of their built environment. And so really thinking about how we are leveraging that and sharing resources along the way, I think is really something quite powerful about how they're able to unify.
So I think as a Caribbean national, we offer a very unique way of living. And I can say this as someone who lived in the States for 10 years. I spend a lot of time in Miami now. Every couple weeks I'm here. And, the human connection element of how we live is something that is sought after and desired. We haven't figured out yet how to package this and sell it to the globe. But there is really a lifestyle and a way of doing things and a, maybe intentional, sometimes not beneficial, but in many instances beneficial slowness to the way Caribbean people intentionally think through how life is, what they want in their life, and executing that is applicable to the rest of the world. I look at where I live or where I'm from, Jamaica for the first time because of the hurricane, and I'm calling on, experts, investors, etc. in the room to have a conversation. We have an $11 billion problem that now needs to be solved. And so it's the first time in my lifetime that I feel like the country has a very measurable investment thesis that needs to be thought through. And there is an opportunity for us to manifest this vision of how people in the region, we talk about Barbados and Mia Motley and, again, Jamaica, how people in the region think about living in a product that then could be broader distributed with a starting point of an island like Jamaica being a test bed for what can work elsewhere in the world. And I think this is the first time in my investing history that this opportunity has been laid bare for people to pursue.
It's interesting because it sparks a question. Sorry, not to take the moderator role. But even when I think about Haiti, which is struggling to find leadership from a government standpoint, and Jamaica, who has strong leadership, or Barbados, or some in Bahamas, like there's so many, St. Thomas, there's so many, all the things. But sometimes you don't actually have leadership in government that actually facilitates a lot of the development that's needed that impacts the whole island. So from your expertise in the way that you're working, how do you navigate working in a space when you don't have that level of commitment and support?
That is probably the
worst question you've ever heard in your
well,
life.
It's the big challenge and dynamic of the region. At the end of the day, we all depend on government to facilitate. One of the things I find that happens in the Caribbean, and this is not to encourage anyone to do anything wrong, but both locals and those looking in tend to suffer from this issue of being beholden to government in a way that I have never seen almost anywhere else in the world. So it's almost like we're always asking, can we do this? And there are a lot of things that people want to do that are actually not really that big a deal. The Caribbean is a very highly regulated destination, right? So we, because of our connection to Europe especially, a lot of laws are already laid in the region. So the foundation is already there for you to understand what you can and can't do. But I find when investors and practitioners come to the ground, the first question they ask is, can we go meet with the government with this mindset that says, I'm now going to go ask for permission to do this thing? And the reality is, you don't need permission for everything. You certainly don't need this kind of individual permission in terms of this guy that we're going to go talk to say yes or no, you can do this. There is actually a very broad layer and foundation that people need to figure out biting more into and following process, but not getting their product or vision contaminated by this individual effect of what happens in islands, right? We're very small places. Ultimately, one person in many instances can influence whether or not you are able to make progress. And when you arm that person with that layer of power, oftentimes unnecessarily, you end up with this, pushback against the progress that you're trying to make. So what we try to do is not only be able to guide players in terms of where to go and how to go about it, but ultimately to say, listen, if you are bringing excellence into a market, which should be your first thought process, if you are bringing excellence into a market, it is very hard for someone to then push back and dispute and prevent what you're bringing forward from happening.
Amazing. Great responses by you both. I think we have time for one more question. And so as we think about the future, particularly over the next 10 years, what will distinguish the cities that got it right from those that actually didn't get it right? And what decisions need to be made today to ensure we're building towards the right future?
I say it often that with architecture, it's not just the end product, it's the process that we're doing it. And so as we're engaging, as we're doing our research, as we're creating the architecture that is sustainable and resilient, it is also about engaging community that we're potentially inspiring the next generation to also know about the profession and think about how they can yield it as a resources that continues to build. So when I think about the impact of architecture, it's beyond the foundation or the footprint of the architecture, but it's actually the impact that the process has made and the overextending reach and how it braids into community to understand how it can be put forward. forward. So I think really when we stop isolating and making the language of architecture even more accessible, where more people can participate in the conversation, then more people will be knowledgeable about how to leverage architecture and design and construction as a way of generational wealth, as a way of safety and security, as a way of embedding and memorializing culture and identity. I think it's really important that we not just focus on the end product, the ribbon cutting and the high five and the really great Instagram pictures, but also about how many people were now inspired to become developers, how many more people now are architects, engineers, how many people are now looking at their local communities, their blocks, their neighborhoods and saying, with a little bit of development here, this could be a game changer for the next generation. So I really think the opportunity is thinking broadly beyond the physical and the tangible. And I know that's crazy to say as the architect on the stage, but to say it's really about long-term impact. So for me, it's always centered on purpose and that mission around it.
Well said.
So I think it's illegal to have a conversation now without mentioning AI. And so, with the shifts that we're expecting to see over the next decade, I would say that it is even more important for not only human connection, but I think developers and sometimes architects make a mistake of not focusing on solving problems for the people that they're going to impact. And so we think of luxury as, we're going to build this wellness destination, and you end up with this very kind of vanilla cookie cutter product that ultimately says, okay, we have to offer yoga and we have to offer this thing. And we don't really think about what is the problem that this person or this demographic of people have, and also not just what is the solution, but what is the path in life that they want to take? What is it that they want to see happen in the long term? And so, when Pascale mentions things like wealth creation, etc., the reality is most people aspire to having a certain level of freedom in their life long term. They aim to have ambitious outcomes. They aim to live life at some level of epitome of human achievement. And then the world puts a lot of confinement around that. So when you then are thinking about development in terms of even our project in Kingston, what we thought about that's innovative is you don't usually see a diversity of businesses planted throughout a single development in the island context, right? So when you start putting lawyers, doctors, accountants, different styles of entrepreneurs in the same places together, all of a sudden you see opportunities manifest that many of them never thought of for themselves, right? Those are the kind of applications that I think the world overall is more and more looking for in terms of how is this actually meaningfully benefiting me beyond the convenience of, I have a garbage chute outside of my door. That means I don't have to walk too far in order to throw away something, but instead puts me in a position where I can have this intersection with others that ultimately helps me to grow and to realize a place in life that is ultimately what I'm trying to pursue.
Fantastic. Great responses by you both. A great panel. Please give them a round of applause. Thank you so much.
Thank you. Amazing moderator.
Thank you. Thank you.